Hello and welcome to the monthly What's New in AWS live stream presented by Enterprise Support. It's good to be back. I haven't been on the show for a few episodes now. I'd like to bring in Graham and Simon as well, who will be hosting the show with me today. And while they are joining us, I thought I'd just quickly cover a few of the topics. Hey Graham, how you doing? Hey Simon.
Oh,
Good,
there I
thanks.
am.
Nice to join you here, Matt.
Hey,
Hey.
good to see you, Matt. Good to see you, Graham.
You too, you too. We got an action-packed show this month. I'm just looking at the agenda. We've got a few things that you're going to cover, Graham, with AI and machine learning.
That's right. I'm bringing in my very good friend Paul Colmer. He's going to be taking us through 2 new releases.
Very good, very good. Paul must be a friend of the show by now. I think he's on every other episode, which is good to see. We should get him on permanently, I think. And Simon, you got some really interesting stuff around Melbourne and our Perth region launches as
That's
well.
right. I think that needs no introduction, but I'll let Renee talk a little bit about the Perth landing zone, the local zone, because he is just really close to his heart.
Awesome, awesome. We've got some compute as well that you and Milad are going to chat about. And lastly, I think Graham and myself will cover a little bit of security and databases, some of our recent releases in that space. All right, that's we've got a lot to talk about. Let's get stuck in. Graham, I might invite you and Paul if you guys wanted to jump into the wonderful world of AI and machine learning.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Please bring Paul Colmer onto the screen. We're going to get started with a new release for Amazon SageMaker Canvas. This exciting new feature release in the machine learning space is an improvement to the SageMaker Canvas service. As Paul comes online, I'll just quickly introduce him. Paul is one of our senior technical trainers specializing in generative artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's a complex topic. Paul does a great job of simplifying it for everybody. So please, Paul, take it away, mate. Tell us about Amazon SageMaker Canvas and the new releases.
Thank you so much, Graham, and thank you all for having me back on the show. So SageMaker Canvas is a machine learning zero-code solution. It's designed for business analysts primarily, but people without any technical knowledge can also benefit from using the service. Canvas provides a visual interface, so you don't need to worry about any code. It simply feeds in your data, generates accurate predictions without requiring any machine learning experience. And that zero code is really the essence of that. It's around commoditizing machine learning and making it available to everyone. So really exciting product.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love all of these no-code, low-code products, especially in the machine learning space. It's such a complicated topic. If you get stuck into it, 10 years ago, you would have had to know a lot of math. You would have had to be really good at statistics. Using the low-code or no-code services can allow anybody to get started, pretty much. So you talked about business people, analysts. Tell us, what's the best way to get started?
Yeah, I think the best way to get started, I say to a lot of my customers, and particularly when we're doing training courses, Amazon SageMaker Canvas, getting started, pop it into Google, and there's a great little tutorial that you can try along with. Maybe the next live stream, we'll do a little bit of a demo, maybe that's what we can do for other viewers. And if you want to see that live demo, just pop that in the chat. And also, if anybody on the session has used Canvas, please pop that in the chat and pop any questions you might have too.
Yeah, great call out. I'd love to know what people are doing with our SageMaker services. It's really impressive just how little effort it can take. Bring data, put together a workflow, and then you can go, right. How about this new release? Tell us what are the performance improvements that have come to the SageMaker Canvas service?
Absolutely. So you can see on the screen there, we're talking about something called model training. So model training is the process of feeding high quality business data. So you might have, say, a spreadsheet of data. Maybe you want to predict house prices. And so you'd feed in that data into Canvas. You'd select the column with the house price, and then you let the algorithm and the automation behind the scenes do its thing. It would then run that model. You can use the quick model training feature, which takes about 15 minutes, or you can use the more advanced feature. It takes about 2 to 6 hours to run that. The algorithm then runs behind the scenes as many iterations. It's able to learn. It's able to get the best accuracy. And at the end, you can view results. And that's all done 3 times faster now, which means you're going to pay for less because you're paying for less of the canvas session to be running. So really, really important for customers.
So say that again, Paul. So because the training process is running faster, customers are still paying the same amount of the service per time, per minute, per hour. But because it's running faster, they're going to pay less.
Exactly right. So what we could do, we could think about, say, a standard build model that would take around 3 hours with a data set of, say, 100 meg. That would only take, say, 60, 70 minutes. But it does depend on the data set, on the complexity, but that's just a specific example. So yeah, there's a lot of cost reduction and time reduction for customers, which is what they've been asking for. So it's fantastic to see that new feature. Very excited.
That's great. Pay less for a quicker result. Fantastic.
Absolutely right.
Let's move on to the next one. We've got one that's more specific to the SageMaker service. This one is really interesting. It's on automated model tuning. Not exactly no code. Take us through this one, Paul.
Yep. So a little bit more complicated, this one. So SageMaker automatic model tuning allows customers to optimize their machine learning models by optimizing something called hyperparameters. Now, I know viewers are probably thinking, what is a hyperparameter? So let me try and use a really good analogy. So you're a fellow musician, Graham, as myself. So I think a musical analogy is in order. So imagine you're creating the best pop song ever, right? You need great musicians, you have a recording studio, and the centerpiece of all that is the mixing desk, of course. So for those maybe that haven't seen a mixing desk, it's the big thing that sits in the middle of the studio with all the faders, all the buttons, all the dials, all the components. Yeah,
yep,
absolutely. All the lovely buttons and components that make the music sound incredible. So let's take that analogy. We can think of a hyperparameter as simply a mathematical value that is really one of those knobs, one of those dials, one of those faders in a music studio. And by tuning those hyperparameters, we get an incredible performing model. We get a highly accurate, high-performing model, and it generates more accurate predictions. So really, really important. So the hyperparameter tuning piece of that is then using machine learning on machine learning to then find the best type of model tuning. If you like, the best settings for your mixing desks. That's probably the best way to describe it.
It's a very meta concept, isn't it? And so what sort of parameters are we talking about here? What sort of improvements can we see?
Yep. So with the automatic model tuning, the system runs a number of different training jobs. And what it does, it then uses that machine learning to understand, I've run 10 training jobs. This training job has the best hyperparameter settings. It takes those settings and you can use them in then a training job on real data for real machine learning. So it's a bit like machine learning on machine learning. That's one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, or maybe you've got somebody that's actually reviewing the results of the machine learning experiments that you've run, picking the one that performed the best, and then using that going forward. Is that a good analogy?
Absolutely right. It absolutely is. Yeah. So the tuning of the dials on that music desk, if you like, you're finding the optimal set of those, and then someone is, like you say, manually choosing, hey, that's the best settings because it's given us the best production sound. So in the model training world, we're going to take that particular model. And then as part of the feature release, the automatic model tuning, we have lots of ways of understanding when our model tuning is complete, when our model tuning is optimized. So there's 3 new features that are being released as part of that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking us through those, Paul. It's a whirlwind tour through the lens of some of our new releases for SageMaker. I'm going to welcome to the stage now Simon Lee. He's going to talk about the Melbourne region, the new Melbourne region, and also Perth local zones with his guest, Rene Abrego. Take it away.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Graham. All right. So last month has been really exciting for Australia, to be honest. So we've got 2 really exciting infrastructure expansion. So on the 12th of January, we had the local zone launched at Perth. And then on the 23rd of January, we had the Melbourne region launch. So Rene, let's talk about the Melbourne region first, shall we?
Yeah, no worries. It's very exciting that AWS is starting to invest in our region here in Australia and New Zealand. There's been lots of movement, as you can see on that map. We're starting to have presence pretty much everywhere, which is really exciting, and it's very good news for our customers, particularly with their workloads that are very latency sensitive. It's a big country to go across, right? So it's really, really good that we're starting to have presence here and there.
And I see purposely hidden the region name on the slides there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I love the investment we've had in Australia and New Zealand. We're probably one of the only countries, I think, apart from the US and Japan, to have multiple regions, in our country, and we're having the New Zealand region coming online soon as well.
yeah, absolutely. So on the screen we have the current stuff that's out there. It's gone GA. So our regions right now are Sydney and Melbourne. And then Perth local zone just came online, like you mentioned. And what we have announced last year is we have both a local zone in Brisbane and in Auckland, but also a region coming to Auckland later on as well as things progress. And currently, we also have points of presences both in Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, as well as Auckland. So we already have a local edge location in Auckland that people can start leveraging with services like CloudFront, for example.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go back to the Melbourne region. So with two regions here, I'm seeing customers that are really excited about having some of their latency sensitive workload, perhaps that were currently hosted on premise, to start experimenting with something like hybrid deployment before eventually migrating to the cloud. But I've also heard about maybe doing like a multi-region type of deployment. What do you think of that, Renee?
So, as with everything, everything has a use case and a time and place for it. Having a multi-region deployment may make sense if your application needs to have that kind of presence, but in most cases, you don't want to do that because it would introduce additional latency, and some things like RDS won't be able to do multi-master across regions. So that's really not that usable in that kind of scenario. But you
Yeah.
really need to take account how you're going to be using both regions. And one really good use case is to use the Melbourne region potentially as a backup, because most customers would already have their presence and their applications running in Sydney, right? So you want to make sure that you're going to be planning for that failover over to Melbourne, and then take off on the ground running in Melbourne and potentially fail back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see
I
one of
think
the
that's
questions.
yeah. Sorry, I
Sorry,
missed
one
the
of the
question.
questions
Go
in the
ahead.
chat is: are all AWS services generally available in both the new region and the local zone? The answer is no. And so a little bit more detail though. So with the Melbourne region, not all the services that are present in Sydney are there yet. They've got a lot of services there now, and in fact, we'll put a link into what services are currently there in a minute. But nonetheless, we have a whole bunch more services coming online later on this year into the region to get it closer to that feature and service parity with Sydney. And in regards to the local zones, the local zone in Perth currently is only suitable for storage and compute resources. So you want to be running your EC2 instances there. For example, S3 is not there yet, but there's nothing stopping you from using a third-party product to use the storage that's available there via GP2, and then present the S3 API there via third-party software.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to the local zone. I know, Renee, the local zone is really close to your heart because a lot of your customers are based on that side of the country. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the local zone is? What's the use case, and what
For
is the
sure.
benefit that it will bring to our customer?
Right, absolutely. So I have some customers in the oil and gas industry, and they have presence throughout Australia. And one of the locations that they want to migrate their workloads from the existing data centers in Perth is right there at the Perth local zone. To give you an idea what latency looks like currently for them, is if they have workloads running in Perth and they're accessing services in Sydney, that's roughly a 70-ish, 78-ish ping or latency for them. Doing some testing, the responses that we've been getting with the Perth local zone, that brings it right back down to around 17 milliseconds of latency. So you could really imagine that for customers based on that side of the country, this local zone represents a great value for them and really brings down that latency and increases their performance and ability to take advantage of AWS services.
Well, that's a pretty significant increase, like a 5x
Absolutely.
increase almost. Wow, thank you. Anything else you want to add, Renee, before we jump on to the next topic?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that you want to start looking at using the Melbourne region for backup workloads, and there's a couple of services that I want to focus in on to get people thinking about how they can start looking at how they can change their applications to start utilizing Melbourne as a failover region. We have a couple of services. In fact, last year in reInvent, we had an announcement for Route 53, the application recovery controller. So with the application recovery controller, it lets you coordinate how your resources are going to fail over between regions. So that's one good use case there. But the announcement that we had was called zonal shift for application recovery controller. So even though you might be thinking of using Melbourne as a failover region, you want to also make sure that you're utilizing the availability zones within Sydney. And with zonal shift, it'll let you do that. So you have one endpoint and you shift your resources from working one AZ over to another one for your self-contained applications. Another thing you could also use is S3 cross-region replication, along with another feature which we have, which is called the multi-region access point that also was announced in reInvent. And what that does, it gives you one single URL or access point for your S3 bucket. And your actual buckets can be hosted in both Sydney and Melbourne. And whenever something goes wrong in Sydney, for example, the end users won't know what actually happened because they're going to be accessing that one endpoint, which will now be pointing to Melbourne region. So at the end of the day, they won't really be aware of what's happened behind the scenes because it's very resilient. That's the whole idea of having multi-region access. And one of the other services that before we wrap up our section is the application migration service. It used to be called Cloud Endure. So folks that might be in the call that have used that service to replicate your data. So the application migration service is great to start replicating your instances, let's say from Sydney over to Melbourne, and then fail over to Melbourne region. And then with another product we have called Elastic Disaster Recovery, not only can you replicate to Melbourne and start working from the Melbourne region, but when Sydney's recovered and back up and working, you can fail back and then have your workloads run from Sydney and then go back to a lower state of just having data replicating back to Melbourne. So it'll let you give you that flexibility between regions anytime.
Yeah, I think this is awesome. There is so much opportunity there with the Melbourne region. I'm excited to see what our customers are doing with it. Thank you, Renee. Thanks for coming on. All right. So next, we're going to talk about compute and networking. Can we bring on Milad?
Good afternoon, Rennie. Simon.
Good afternoon, Milad. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. How are you going?
I am doing well as well. What do you have for us today?
So today I'm planning on talking about some of the pretty interesting feature releases in the compute space. So first one is the EC2 Image Builder. So as we all know, AWS has a very large ecosystem of software vendors providing custom AMIs for various use cases through AWS Marketplace, right? So things like software applications, various tools, operating systems. But many customers need to customize those AMIs before they can actually use them. And last month, we had two pretty interesting feature releases to help with that particular use case. So one was the ability to search AWS Marketplace directly from EC2 Image Builder console and use those AMIs as the base image in the build workflow. It basically makes it easier for customers to seamlessly track and integrate AWS Marketplace AMIs into the image customization workflows that they have. And pretty much all of those without leaving the EC2 Image Builder console, which really simplifies custom AMI build process, Simon.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've actually tried to use it before when I was building my personal WordPress site. And it's just so much easier not having to go to the marketplace and search for these AMIs. Is all directly in the EC2 console.
Oh, absolutely. Previously, you had to browse to marketplace separately, search for a compatible AMI, grab the AMI ID, go back. So this is single
for the region, and absolutely. I remember.
The next one is, I guess, particularly interesting for customers who are highly regulated or they need a certain security requirements that mandate use of hardened AMIs using Center for Internet Security Benchmark, or CIS. So EC2 Image Builder now hosts CIS benchmark level 1 for different versions of Linux and Microsoft Windows operating systems. So all you need to do is you need to subscribe to the CIS AMI through AWS Marketplace, through the EC2 Image Builder console, and then that will unlock access to the CIS hardening component in the EC2 Image Builder. So effectively eliminates the need for customers to maintain their own codes, or their own scripts, or third-party tools that they previously used to use to harden AMIs. It just makes life much easier.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really cool that the tools and the scripts are all built into the AMI, so you don't actually have to install them and most importantly maintain them, right? As you're trying to achieve CIS compliance.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work. You always had to make sure you're on top of the new changes and releases in the CIS benchmark framework. You had to make sure you read the documentation, come up with the code, maintain it. No longer needed.
Yeah,
it's all built in.
Taking heavy lifting away from the customers. Love it.
Absolutely. And let them focus on the business.
That's right.
If you could move on to the
What's next
slide, please. Okay, Port Advisor for Graviton. So if people on the call not familiar with Graviton, Graviton is an ARM-based processor that's designed by AWS. In fact, Graviton 3 processors are the latest in the family. They provide up to 25% better compute performance, and they're supported by a number of different versions and flavors of the Linux operating system. Many of the popular applications and services for security, monitoring, containers, CI/CD tools, they all support Graviton-based instances. And I really recommend them to my customers because you're getting less price point for a much better performance, CPU performance within your instance. Like who doesn't want more CPU for less money, right?
Yeah.
But the question always was, how do I know which workload I can migrate to Graviton, right? And it was a really interesting one to answer. Like, how are you gonna understand whether your workload is actually gonna be compatible? And that's when the reporting advisor comes into the picture, Simon.
Yeah, I think a lot of customers do recognize the benefit of moving from x86 based to ARM-based processors. Like you've mentioned the cost savings, but there's also the energy savings for sustainability as you move to ARM. But you're right, it's very difficult to know what can be migrated, and it's a pretty big change. It's not like just moving your instance type and not worried about it. How does this help our customers, Milad?
Yeah, so the Porting Advisor is an open source CLI tool, and it analyzes the source code and then generates a report highlighting missing or outdated libraries, or even the code constructs that may require modifications. Even more interesting, it recommends alternatives if your code is not compatible. So pretty much since the Graviton processors came out, I always used to get this question from customers. Well, I love the idea. I'm gonna get more CPU clocks. I'm gonna pay less, but what can I move to Graviton, right? So this Porting Advisor is gonna answer the question for us.
Yeah. So you're saying so this is a open source command line tool. So you're saying our customers can just run this this tool locally, right? Just to test the code before they deploy.
That's right. So you deploy the code, you download it from the source repo, you deploy it on your system, you let it analyze the source code, and it tells you whether you can directly run it on a Graviton-based instance or you need to make some changes. Everything with all of that without even spinning up a new instance up in the cloud.
Gotcha. What's next, Milad?
There's a lot.
Moving on to the networking space, right?
Absolutely. So a couple of interesting updates on the networking side of the world. So if you remember, about a year ago in March 22, we launched a new VPC creation experience that basically streamlined the process of creating and connecting VPC resources. So if you remember back in the days, you had to create the subnets separately, route tables separately, and then had to associate them separately. all of that. It's been a lot of manual work. This new creation experience streamlined it, and more importantly, came up with an interactive diagram that displayed a preview of the VPC architecture. And it actually updates itself as you change different options and you choose different things in the console, right? But then the thing is that interesting interactive visual used to go away after you created the VPC. You no longer had it. So what's changed last month was we brought this back to the existing VPCs. So if you have an existing VPC, and if you go to the resource map tab within your VPC, you get to see this visual again. So I'm personally a very visual person, Simon. I used to draw an imaginary diagram in my head, trying to figure out how the traffic flows within a VPC and all that. I really no longer need to do this. It's all taken care of.
Yeah, Milad. I mean, you can draw mental diagrams in your head. My mental power is very weak. I can't even draw that. So this is super helpful for me because I need pictures to help me understand. I only read books of pictures,
100%. And next one is actually quite interesting on this, and actually goes with this VPC conversation. So if you scroll to the next slide, it's about IPAM. So pretty much answers a challenge that many networking teams used to have in the past, and probably they're even facing today. So traditionally, if you remember back in the days, network engineers used to run different spreadsheets, maintain subnets and IP address spaces, and make sure there's no duplicates and whatnot. So not too long ago, we introduced availability of our Amazon VPC IP address manager, or as we know it, IPAM, which was a feature that makes it easier for you to plan, track, and monitor IP address allocations within your AWS workloads, right?
Yeah.
But last month, we extended the capability of IPAM to manage IP addresses in accounts outside of your AWS organizations using AWS Resource Access Manager. So with this release, your network can extend to VPCs that are in accounts outside of your org. For example, you might have a managed service provider maintaining a set of VPCs for you outside of the original organization, right? This is going to allow you to have one centralized IPAM managing IP addresses across various accounts, various organizations, and you no longer need to maintain 10 different spreadsheets and use 3 different tools, number of deployments of IPAM. You no longer need to do any of them. So making life of engineers a lot easier.
And you don't have to worry about, IP overlaps when you're peering VPCs and then just looking at the route tables and scratching your head, figuring out what's going on. Why is this not working? This is great. Yeah. Thank you, Milan.
I absolutely remember of receiving a little pop-up in my Windows box telling me that there's an IP conflict, and then good luck figuring it out. Really.
Yeah. Thank you, Milan. All right. So next, We'll have Graham and Matt come back on, and what are they going to talk to us about? Is it security and database?
That's right. Thanks, Simon. We have security and databases now to chat about. But I just wanted to say, Milad, thank you for bringing back all my nightmares about IP address allocations. It's you're right. That definitely solves a lot of problems that we used to solve very, very manually in the past. I'm not sure about yourself, Graham, but I think I might have some hard time sleeping tonight knowing that that's out there.
Wondering why it took so long.
Yeah, exactly. I really like that porting advisor for Graviton as well. I can see a lot of our customers are aggressively migrating to Graviton, but to have this as your tooling to verify your libraries and your code is ready, I think that's pretty cool. I can see a lot of people baking that into their CI/CD tooling as an optional step.
Absolutely, yeah.
That is one announcement that did give me some flashbacks. I used to work in Fortran code for numerical simulations and had to port that from Windows to Linux one time and then back the other way. Having some assistance in being able to work with Fortran code, there's been no new documentation written about that for 30 years? automated assistance is fantastic.
Yeah.
That's right. You poor thing. I'm sure you're still talking to your counselor about it to this day. All right, we've got a few security and databases releases to get through. What's the first one we're going to look at is going to be around S3 and automatic server-side encryption. Really excited about this one. It's super simple to a degree, but I think it's such a critical feature now for our customers. If you haven't heard or you haven't seen it, we've now turned on server-side encryption by default. So what that means is, you might remember back in 2017, Graham, we created an optional default encryption feature. So the customers had the option to turn on server-side encryption, turn on customer managed, or even turn on KMS if they were looking for it. But now we've gone ahead and enforced that. So any new buckets that are created will automatically get it. And also any existing buckets will also, any new objects in those buckets will get the server-side encryption feature turned on as well.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, for a feature like this to be automatically added, the customer doesn't have to do anything, basically, especially for the new buckets. And there's no impact to your workloads, to your traffic. Everything's handled on our servers, and there's no impact to performance. You don't have to manage it at all.
Yeah, while we're kind of reminiscing of the good old days, I remember when there was a cost to encryption about 15, 20 years ago. And then we put in AES and the CPUs, and ever since then it's kind of cascaded down. So now there is no cost to do it, and it's really good to see that we've baked that in at the object level. For anyone who is curious, have a look at CloudTrail. While we do the rollout, you'll see CloudTrail turn on those encrypted buckets in your environment if you do want to know when you've been when that feature has changed for your accounts. Just a quick reminder, what does it do? What does it solve? Encryption at rest. So what it's giving you is ensuring physical security of your data as it sits somewhere in AWS.
Yeah, so this is adding to our existing security controls that protect your data on the physical side of the shared responsibility model. So once again, it's augmenting the existing controls that we had, but this is just making it the default option, which is the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Jumping forward, AWS Network Firewall now announces IPv6 support. Have you had a chance to play much with IPv6 at all, Graham?
No, once again, I was late to the party in learning about networking in IT. It was a bit of a learning curve for me, actually. Yeah.
Well, I won't go too deep on IPv6 today. Maybe we can save that for another show. But for anyone who hasn't had a chance to play with it too much, there's a lot of docs out there. We've got some blog posts as well. Definitely recommend you taking a look. But at a high level, I thought it's worth mentioning, we have two modes for IPv6 at AWS. One is dual stack, where it supports IPv4 and v6 at the same time. And then there's a second mode, which is IPv6 only. So for this release, for Network Firewall, this release enables it through dual stack. So if you have a VPC and workloads that are using dual stack, now you can also secure the IPv6 component as well.
Nice. And remind me again, what other services and products have IPv6 support?
Yeah, so have a quick search, and when you have a chance, for AWS services that support IPv6, you'll get the official list. At a high level, the way I at least try to remember it is most services now support dual stack, so that's done. And when it comes to IPv6 only, the way that I kind of give myself a bit of a nudge on what currently supports it is looking at highly scalable web apps. So for example, if you traverse outside in, Route 53, Shield, WAF, and then you get into the VPC, and then EC2, and then also EKS as well. All of those services support IPv6 only. Bear in mind though, something to call out is S3, CloudFront, and Global Accelerator currently do not support IPv6 only. So if you are building a workload that might have some static content with global CDNs, just factor that you might not be able to do that through an IPv6 only configuration.
Good to know. Thanks, Matt. What have we got next?
Moving on, yeah, we've got a couple now. So Kinesis data stream. So this is one of my favorites, only because I'm a big fan of the event architectures. So what we've released is Amazon Kinesis data streams for DynamoDB. We've released it now to additional 11 regions. What it means for anyone who's not too familiar with Kinesis is it's our data streaming platform for event-driven architectures. Fully managed, fully scalable, in real time. And what it allows you to do is collect, process, and analyze as well real-time streaming data across all of your workloads. A typical question is, well, what is streaming data? It's effectively, it's an ingestion engine. So it's real-time data for everything that might be happening across your machine workloads. Video, logs, click streams, telemetry, all the outputs of your workloads can go into this big engine. And then from there, it gives you the opportunity to do stuff with it. Whether that, could be alerting, it could be connection, integration to other systems as well.
Yeah, nice. Remind me, Matt, what's the use case here? I seem to remember in the back of my mind this being a question in the AWS Professional Solution Architect certification around replicating Dynamo tables across regions. Am I in the right ballpark here, or what other use cases are there?
Yeah, it's you can definitely consider replication. I mean, taking one step back, or maybe 2 or 3 steps back, NoSQL is good for unstructured schemaless data. So back in the day, you would have had, again, it feels like we're reminiscing a bit in this episode, but you would have just had your typical database, SQL queries. You'd have to very much structure it. You knew about every column, every field. But now this is a bit more in an unstructured context. Typically, what is that used for? Video analytics, IoT. A lot of our payments customers as well really build that NoSQL architecture into their data architecture. So what this allows is it allows effectively the ability to capture item level changes on your DynamoDB and then stream them into Kinesis. So whatever you're doing with your data, if maybe you're tracking orders, or you're tracking sales, or you're tracking, whatever's happening inside your video online gaming experience at the time, you can take that and then react to it inside Kinesis.
Fantastic.
And last but not least, just a call out. We've got a few, I think February is going to be the month of database upgrades. So have a look. We've released Postgres 14.6, 13.9, 12.13, 11.18. There's a few that's gone out there. Just a gentle reminder that Postgres 15 is also in preview mode. So if you haven't had a chance to use it and you are looking to upgrade from 14, have a go and have a look at it and see if that works for your needs. Also, just a friendly reminder too, before we close, we've got a couple of SQL deprecations that are very active at the moment and are coming up to end of life. So that's Postgres 10.x and also MySQL 1.0. If you're on any of those 2 versions, reach out to your account team and definitely have a plan to get them upgraded as soon as possible.
Is there anywhere else customers can go to get some assistance with these deprecations for existing resources?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Trusted Advisor is the key place. Go there and it's going to tell you everything you need to know and how to respond to it as well.
Yeah, great. Trusted Advisor will show them which resources are going to get impacted. Yeah, good call out.
That's right. All right. I think that's it for this month. That was a bit of an action-packed show. We covered a lot. I'm really excited about the Melbourne region launch. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in and seeing what our customers are doing in that new region. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this month. As you know, we stream on the second Friday of each month. So join us for your next lunch break. And we're looking forward to seeing you soon. Bye.